There is a fracture in Mount Everest history, a single moment where the timeline splits in two. On one side of the break, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine are moving slowly with no chance whatsoever to make their destination. On the other side of the break, they're moving quickly ahead of schedule, moving with purpose and perhaps, just perhaps, minutes or hours away from standing on the top of the world. The entire difference between these two scenarios comes down to one man, Noel Odell, and one specific time, 12:50 p.m., June 8, 1924. And for over 100 years, historians have been debating and trying to fix what Noel Odell saw that day. Some have said he was confused, maybe hallucinating from the altitude. Some say he didn't see anything at all, that they were just two rocks that he spotted up on the ridge. Others believe he saw them extremely close to the final pyramid, a short distance from actually reaching the top of the mountain. But what if we stop trying to fix the witness? What if we assume the man who was actually there was right the first time?
For me, two write-ups done by Odell are very important.
This is Ajay Dandekar. He's a professor in the Department of History, School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Shiv Nadar University in Delhi. And together with his research partner, Philip Summers, an Australian researcher, a historian and writer, together they have come up with some fascinating takes on the mystery of Mallory and Irvine. And we're going to come back to Ajay to help him highlight some of the arguments for what he believes Noel Odell saw on that fateful day, June 8th, 1924.
First one is the diary entry. That's the first one, just one line that he writes, that saw M&I nearing the base of the final pyramid. That must have been his first impression. Then he sustained that argument in the dispatches, where for me the telling line is the last three lines where he says, "The very near at the base of the final pyramid." Very near at the base of the final pyramid.
Let's go back to 12:50 p.m. on June 8th, 1924. Let's stand next to the last man who ever saw them alive. And let's see if we can figure out what he really saw. But before we get to the map and the timeline and what Odell observed, we have to get to the criticism. For many years in London at the Royal Geographical Society, and even from some of his teammates on the 1924 expedition, his initial sighting and what he wrote in the Alpine Journal was doubted, reconstructed. How could he possibly have seen Mallory and Irvine so close to the summit? Some actually called it a hallucination. The day I interviewed Ajay Dandekar about these theories, about where he believes Odell absolutely saw Mallory and Irvine on that day, and which points to the route he believed they took that day, I was shocked at the synchronicity of what took place on a hike that I took only an hour or so after our interview. I went up onto Mount Washington, which is not that far from my home. And in the winter conditions, I just felt some presence, and have many times, from our friend Noel Odell. My partner in crime and I decided to do a hike up the Huntington Ravine Trail, which is where Noel Odell himself had come many times to ice climb. And shortly after, as we were considering, again earlier, remembering that you're talking about how Odell looked way up upon the ridge to notice two tiny dots surmounting the ridge. And we stopped here and looked up to the Lionhead Trail and could see a tiny figure up there. And I wondered if Noel Odell perhaps experienced the same. It's said to me that perhaps Noel Odell wanted this story told.
Yeah, you can barely tell he's moving, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And so if I can pick a climber out on a ridge in the distance on Mount Washington, I believed right then and there that, yes, absolutely, Odell could have seen Mallory and Irvine moving with alacrity up the ridge. The big question is, where did Odell see them? And speaking with researcher Ajay Dandekar, he insists that it's the first impression made by Odell that is the critical impression, and that all the others that he made in later years in his life were made because of doubt or somebody shading him, if you will. So let's let Ajay take us through that.
The doubts creep in for him. And then again, towards the end of his life, I think he came back to the original position. And there's evidence of that. I don't remember the name, but he was hosted for a dinner. And one gentleman shared his table. And he then asked the question of all the questions that, where did you see them? And he said, I had no doubts in my mind that they were above the second step.
Well, that gentleman who Ajay is referring to is none other than Everest historian Tom Holzell, who has been on Everest Mystery on a number of occasions. And Tom Holzell absolutely confirms that when he asked Odell where he saw Mallory and Irvine, Odell said without hesitation it was above the second step. I want to cut very quickly to Jake Norton's exceptional blog post about Noel Odell's last sighting, and where Jake includes in the publication by Odell in the Alpine Journal. Odell wrote, at 1250, just after I had emerged in a state of jubilation at finding the first definite fossils on Everest, there was a sudden clearing of the atmosphere, and the center of the summit ridge and final peak of Everest were unveiled. My eyes became fixed on one tiny black spot silhouetted on a small snow crest beneath a rock step in the ridge, and the black spot moved. Another black spot became apparent and moved up the snow to join the other on the crest. The first then approached the crest rock step and shortly emerged at the top. The second did likewise. Then the whole fascinating vision vanished, enveloped in a cloud once more. There was but one explanation, Odell goes on to say. It was Mallory and his companion moving, as I could see, even at that great distance, with considerable alacrity, realizing doubtless that they had none too many hours of daylight to reach the summit from their present position and return to Camp 6 by nightfall. The place on the ridge mentioned is a prominent rock step at a very short distance from the base of the final pyramid, and it was remarkable that they were so late in reaching this place. Noel Odell wrote that in the Alpine Journal, volume 36, issue 229. This is from 1924. And as Jake Norton goes on to say, some of Odell's wording and interpretations of precisely where the two climbers were sighted changed enough and left a lot open to interpretation. They could have been on the first step, they could have been on the second step, or they could have been on the third step. It seems that good stories like this are often rewarded with kismet or some kind of synchronicity. Like when I was interviewing Ajay Dandekar, I went for a hike afterward on Mount Washington. As I had told you earlier in the video when I pointed out the lone figure up on the Lionhead Trail. And what's really crazy is I stop at this one point along the trail as I'm moving up, and it's one of my favorite places. It has this absolutely beautiful tree. And when I was training for Mount Everest in 2019, I would go there and feel tingling all over the back of my neck. And I have always associated this point in the trail with Noel Odell. It wasn't until recently that I remembered and realized, yes, Noel Odell hiked on these trails many times, and I thought, how interesting. I just interviewed Ajay Dandekar about Noel Odell's last sighting of Mallory and Irvine on Mount Everest. Now that's synchronicity. So if you'll allow me for just a minute before we get into the thick of the story, I want to tell you about something also really cool, and it's the reason I'm able to do this video. And that's because of Suunto and my Vertical 2 watch. You want to be able to rely on all your gear. And so this Vertical 2 by Suunto, I haven't taken it off my wrist, and it's even measuring my sleep quality every night, my heart rate, and my recovery speed after a hard workout in the mountains. When Suunto asked me to check out their flagship adventure watch, the Vertical 2, I was really excited. It's designed for explorers like me who live for the outdoors. Over time, I've come to rely on some of the Vertical 2's features, like exceptionally long battery life, training with GPS up to 65 hours, daily use up to 20 days, and the large display, an impressive 1.5-inch energy efficient AMOLED screen. It's like nothing I've seen before. Military grade durability. My favorite thing has been the free offline maps. And I'm always a nerd for a watch with a flashlight. Check this thing out. Say I drop my keys when I get back to my car after dark, and boom, so cool, there are your keys. And another thing that's really cool is you link the watch up with the Suunto app on your phone. It becomes your complete training tool, tracking your recovery, exploring new routes, and with Zone Sense, it gives you real-time intensity feedback so you always know exactly how hard to push. So whether you're cranking or out in what feels like a slow-motion sufferfest, the Vertical 2 is constantly keeping track of everything that's happening, showing my heart rate, what elevation I'm at, how far I've gone, or how far I need to go to get to my destination. The Vertical 2 tracks my steps, my gains. Every heartbeat helps me understand how my body is responding. Should I push a little harder? Should I go a little faster? Usually in winter, the answer is yes. And the offline maps are my favorite part. They keep me en route or help me get back en route if I decide to bushwhack somewhere that I haven't been before. And during winter, when you're out there and there's snow constantly covering old tracks, you really need these offline maps if you get lost. The Vertical 2 isn't just a watch, it's like a partner, constantly giving me feedback during training, during rest, even keeping tabs on how I'm recovering during sleep. I love being in the mountains. This is where I connect with nature, and it's where I find my serenity. If any of this makes any sense to you, the Vertical 2 will make a great addition to your equipment. And now they're offering the viewers of this channel something special. If you buy Suunto's new Race 2 or Vertical 2, you'll get a free strap worth $49 at the Suunto US official store. I'll drop a link in the description below and put one in the pinned comment as well, so you can grab one now. Now let's get back to that really amazing story about Noel Odell's final view. Let's look at the entire north face. This is essentially the view you get of Mount Everest from base camp. Obviously, this is zoomed in. This black line on the left, this is from Camp 5. And below this is a ridge. That's the north peak of Everest, blocking the view of that mountain. Odell, on his way up to Camp 6 on June 8th, he was searching. He was looking for fossils, evidence of fossils. And on his way up, he was taking his time, certainly in no hurry. And it was estimated that it was in this general location where Odell looked up to the ridge to see Mallory and Irvine. Now, remember, this is Camp 6 here. He looked up, 12:50 p.m., June 8th, 1924, and said, a prominent rock step. And now, here's the first step, here's the second step, and here's the third step. Now look at these. That's fairly prominent. The first step is. The second step, fairly prominent. The third step, not so much so. And so as I get into Ajay Dandekar's breakdown of this, Ajay very much believes, because of the time of day that Mallory and Irvine were seen, he feels that they were seen on top of the second step, and that other theories that Mallory and Irvine were seen at the top of the third step are really hard to gut, because there's no way they could have been that far along the ridge at 12:50 p.m. had they, and this is also on the presupposition of some other researchers, had they taken the route underneath the ridge and used what's now known as the Norton couloir. If Norton were to emerge from this route that he was taking, he wouldn't have come out on the top of the third step. He would have come out more in the pyramid itself, where there's a traverse that then goes all the way up to the summit. And now this is a topic for a whole other video, but there are other climbers who have been up to the summit via the route essentially that Norton was endeavoring to take that day, and where they came out was not on top of the third step, and they came out at the most logical exit. Tim McCartney-Snape, Phil Ursula, and Reinhold Messner, who have climbed up, and they did not emerge on the third step. They took the route that any climber would take, and any theories that Mallory and Irvine might have started there and diverted to another route, it just doesn't hold any water. Why would Mallory and Irvine go a way that Reinhold Messner wouldn't go? So we have to understand that it's very likely that if Mallory and Irvine did take the Norton couloir route, that they would not have emerged on top of the third step. I know, it's a lot to put together, isn't it? But Ajay wanted to eliminate the possibility that somebody would consider that they were seen on the third step. And Ajay himself believes they did take the ridge route and not the couloir route. And so this brings us to really one of the most exciting parts of all. If Odell is right and they were at the second step or nearing the third step at 12:50 p.m., they wouldn't have been moving slowly. They would have been moving incredibly well, as Odell said, with alacrity. And let me cut to Ajay here.
We know that they started early. That time is noted. But if we look at Norton's time and if we look at their time, it takes them about 6 to 7 hours from their camp to reach Norton's high point. Now, imagine if Mallory and Irvine took the Norton's route, then ideally by 12:50 they would not be on the ridge. They would be somewhere at the Norton's high point. And from that high point, how does one end up at the third step? I don't think there's a route there that will take you. You will end up on the north face as Messner did and climb that, but not on the third step. That's a detour, I think. Why would you do that? But that aside, I think the important point is ended up around 1 o'clock at the Norton's high point. Mallory, if he took that route, he also would have ended up at the high point of Norton by around 1. We know that he was not there. We know that Odell at 12:50 certainly saw them on the ridge. That much is very clear.
Okay, now here's the biggie. Ajay believes that Mallory and Irvine climbed the second step. And for those of you who have believed forever that it would have been impossible for Mallory to climb the second step, there are many out there who have been there, who have climbed the second step, who believe it would have been possible for George Mallory to climb the second step. And it's impossible to know what the snow conditions were then, if it was easier, if there was a ramp or a slope up. Andy Politz, who climbed up the second step using the ladder in 1991, speaks emphatically about the ability, or what he perceives would have been the ability, of Mallory and Irvine to surmount the second step. I featured Andy in a video, and I'll put that link in the description below.
Could they have done it? Sure. Could they have climbed the second step? Well, they didn't have to do it in pure technique. Could George Mallory have stood on Andrew Irvine's shoulder and reached the hand jam of hand jams? You couldn't have fallen out if both your legs popped off. That hand jam was so good that it's so natural. I don't think there's any trouble with them having climbed the second step.
Let me let Ajay explain it ever so briefly, so then all the pieces of the puzzle can be put together and you can make up your own mind on what you thought really happened on June 8th.
Odell was a trained geologist. He had a very clear eye. He would not have gone wrong. And I think they were at the crux of the second step. I also feel that Mallory's plan was radical. They reached the second step early. And I think they reached it at least an hour before Odell saw them. Mallory prepared the second step for a free climb. And I looked at Conrad Anker's free ascent of the second step, and it looks eerily easy. He in fact could also free both of his hands at one particular juncture. It was a free handhold that he could do. Certainly it was well within Mallory's abilities to climb. Also, I feel that they roped it. Otherwise there is no way they could have come down the second step in the evening, which would have meant that one needs to look at the rope that you got down from Mallory's body to see how many times it must have been cut. But perhaps earlier to that, they maybe cut the rope at the second step to allow Mallory to prepare the second step and rope it. And that's how I think Mallory free climbed it, fixed the rope, and then Irvine followed with the oxygen rack and the oxygen bottle. And they used that rope to come down. Perhaps they rappelled down up to the crux.
So when you take away all the debate, all the differences of opinion, and narrow it down to just the last sighting of Noel Odell, and from the perspective of that first dispatch of his, you have one thing. Two men moving strong high upon the northeast ridge. Whether Mallory and Irvine made it to the summit or not, we very well might never know. We do know that they turned around somewhere. One, because having been at the site of George Mallory's remains on May 16th in 1999, you can see in this photograph of Andy at the remains, and I'm going to respectfully blur out the actual body of George Mallory. You can see the summit overhead, and where we are at that point in time is decidedly east of even the first step. And so if Odell did see human beings, and we're pretty sure he did, even if that was on the first step, it means that Mallory and Irvine had turned around. Even if that was their high point, they were making their way back down and the tragedy occurred. So I know a lot of people say most accidents, most deaths occur when somebody is on the way down. That very well may be true, but it doesn't mean that on their way down was from the summit. We know Mallory and Irvine were on their way down, but they might have rightly decided to take a turn back home because of the snow squall that hit them. They might have run out of oxygen. We don't know. There are so many factors in this. And I have to mention the incredible research and blog posts and books of Jochen Hemleb, of Mark Sinnott, Jake Norton, Tom Holzell, Bob Edwards, now of course Ajay Dandekar, all of them with slightly different takes on what might have happened that day and what Odell had seen, all of them extremely respectful of those who have differences of opinion. So let me return back to the Lionhead Trail, that footage one last time, that figure on the crest of the ridge. And you know, when you see a climber on the skyline, you don't forget it. I stood there transfixed for minutes and it didn't move. I couldn't believe it. And then also knowing that I was in the spot, in a place that Noel Odell himself had been about 100 years ago, it sent chills up and down my spine. And we certainly know Ajay Dandekar's take on this. I'd be curious to know what you think. Please take a moment to leave your comments in the section below. And if you've enjoyed this video and you're still here and you haven't subscribed yet, would you please take a moment and subscribe to this channel? And also consider checking out the member section by clicking the join button. Several layers of membership. There are hours and hours of exclusive content on there, so you can really get your fill. Most of my live streams are in there as well at different levels and tiers. Check that out. Or if you're more interested in it, go to patreon.com/EverestMystery. And also be sure to check out our merchandise. Lots of glassware, really, really cool stuff with the Everest Mystery logo on it. We also have some apparel, hats and hoodies, really, really fun stuff. Here's a hat right here as well. And also, more important than anything whatsoever, respect your fellow friends, even those who disagree with you, and do somebody a small favor. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you.